But what I found in the last 2 years or so, I've been approached by many companies offering ridiculous guaranteed monthly amounts like 3% a month.
Yeah, that's 36% a year.
A month.
That's without compounding.
Yeah, it's crazy. And they're not regulated. They're often working from an operation in Deir or Karama. Or actually, I did go and meet one in Ema Square recently.
You go and meet them?
Yeah, I've met some of these, and I've done some mystery shopping. And there's only so much I can say, though, about these firms because defamation laws here.
Hello and welcome to Masters of Wealth. Today we have the pleasure of hosting Nigel Sillitoe. Nigel is the founder and CEO of Insight Discovery. Insight Discovery is a multiple award-winning consultancy that advises companies on strategic communications, market intelligence, and events. The majority of its clients are financial and professional services companies. Global Investor voted Insight Discovery as the best consultancy firm in the Middle East every year between 2014 and 2021. Nigel also has 30 years of experience in the financial services sector. He has been the CEO of 2 DFSA regulated entities, BNY Mellon and Thames River Capital. Nigel went to Oxford Brookes University, is married, and has 2 daughters at university in the UK. Nigel, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So tell us, who is Nigel on a personal level?
Wow, okay. I am British, although I should really say English. And I spent my early years in Surrey, which is south of London. Went to some very good private schools. My mother used to trade properties. We'd only stay in a house for 2 years, and the money she made then funded private school education for children. So I have only but respect for my mother and what she did to give us the best education she could.
Nice.
So she's no longer here, unfortunately, but I have very fond memory of my mother and the pain she went through to give us a good start in life. And then I went to work in the insurance sector very early on with Minetz, which was a reinsurance broker. And I didn't particularly enjoy it. It was all about faxing, very tedious. So I then actually went into financial advice with a company that definitely doesn't exist anymore. I only spent about maybe a year there because I didn't always agree with the ethics of the way they were selling long-term savings contracts with very high fees, which obviously paid the broker quite a lot of commission.
This was in the UK?
That was in the UK,
Okay.
yeah.
Which year was this?
This was, gosh, you got to remember at my age, my memory's a bit phasey these days, but we're talking about the early 80s.
Early 80s.
And when it wasn't very regulated.
And this stuff still happens in maybe different parts of the world.
Yeah, less so in the UK because obviously it's very regulated, but in those days it was a bit of like the Wild West, and there were lots of unethical financial advisors. And I was very lucky. I met somebody who said, you've got to meet a friend of mine who works for a merchant bank. Maybe there's a job for you there. I had an interview, luckily landed as a broker-dealer. And that was my start in a serious financial institution. So that's why I have kind of a good idea about the financial advisory market, because I did have a short stint there, but most of my career has been with very large institutional money managers.
Very nice. And you moved to the region, specifically Bahrain, in 2001. What was the driving force of moving to the region, especially that early on?
Yeah, that's true. It's unusual. So I was working for Newton Fund Managers, which is still around, a very successful investment management company, now part of Bank New York Mellon. And they were doing a JV with a local bank in Bahrain called Ali United. And they needed me to finalize on the JV. So I was sent with my wife, who was about 7 months pregnant. And this was just before 9/11. So I remember those days incredibly well. And it took maybe about a year to get the JV over the line, but we secured a couple of billion of dollars of assets for Newton. and I didn't really want to work for the JV, so I set up Newton and Mellon, which was the ultimate owner, as a separate business in Bahrain, regulated by the UAE Central Bank, and that was in 2002.
By the UAE Central Bank or the Bahrain?
Oh, sorry, Bahrain.
Central Bank.
Yeah,
okay.
Bahrain. Thank you.
And then you moved to the UAE. So is it because Bahrain was the primary financial services area in the region, and that was what drove you to Dubai? Or what was the driving change to Dubai?
In those days, Bahrain was the main financial center for the Middle East. Previously, it was Lebanon, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah.
So it was Lebanon, Beirut, then it moved to Bahrain. And then in 2005, they started building DIFC. And I asked my company for a move to Dubai because I could see that Bahrain was kind of slipping a bit, failing to attract many new players. It was all happening in Dubai. So my family, my kids were actually born in Bahrain. We all moved to DIFC or Dubai in 2005, and I think we were license number 37, so one of the very early players to be regulated by the DFSA, which is obviously within the DIFC.
Okay. And how different at the time was Bahrain from the UAE and Dubai, moving from Bahrain to the UAE?
No, it was a very easy transition, a bit more expensive in Dubai, particularly when
even at that time.
Even at that time, yeah. I remember the villa my bank paid for. Yeah, the rent was still pretty crazy high actually compared to Bahrain. But I could see Bahrain, as many other people could, as becoming a major financial center in the Middle East.
Okay. So you've been here for quite a while. So how have you seen it change? Because it has changed dramatically. So what has been your most shocking part of how this region has changed, or how the UAE has changed over that time?
It's probably best if we focus on UAE, because I only spent a couple of years in Bahrain. Although I had very happy times there, it's a very small community, particularly for expats. So Dubai has obviously had its ups and downs. I went through the downturn in 2009, which was very painful, when lots of people left left their cars at the airport to collect dust. So Dubai and Abu Dhabi has its, like any economy, its ups and downs, but it's been amazing what's happened over the last 5 to 10 years, particularly when it comes to the growth in the two main financial centers here in Dubai, the DIFC, and down the road in Abu Dhabi Global Markets. And the number of companies that have set up here is phenomenal. Whether it be hedge fund managers, investment management companies, private equity firms, it's clearly booming. There are obviously troubles in this part of the world, which have been well publicized, of course. But I've been through the Second Gulf War. I've been through 9/11. So for me, having been here for over 20 years, I'm quite used to stress points.
Yeah. And I feel like with the UAE, once you get used to it, you really understand that the region is, each part of the region is different, right? The UAE, really, you feel in a place where there's safety and you don't feel like it's as volatile. Maybe economically, when you've lived here for a while, you see its ups and downs economically, but politically not as much.
Yeah, and sometimes you forget you're even in the Middle East.
Yeah.
I was in Singapore recently, and there are quite a few parallels. So it's so well organized and structured. I really enjoy my time here. I've got a golden visa. I was lucky to pick one up quite early on, so I've got another 8 years of uninterrupted residency. And my wife actually is coming back to Dubai later this month, because my eldest is in her final year at uni, so it'd be great to have my wife living back here.
Very nice, very nice. And that's a common theme you see. I used to see it more 10 years ago and more 20 years ago, where you'd see the one of the partners staying and working in the region, and then their spouse and the kids living back home. And you were telling me that that's what you've went through as a family in 2011.
Yeah.
So tell me more about that and what drove that decision.
Yeah, sure. I lost my job with Thames River Capital, hedge fund manager, because that was during the crisis. So they needed to cut costs. So They reduced their staff count by about 15%. I was a casualty, and I set up Insight Discovery, which I still do. And I needed to make sure that we didn't have too many overheads here. So my wife and children went back to the UK, partly because of the cost of living here, particularly if you're not on a big expat package, and also the education at that time in the UK was far superior to here. That has changed because obviously now there are far more schools, but maybe 10 years ago it was a bit limited in choice, and I just felt they could have a better upbringing back in the UK.
And that must have been a massive shift from being, on the operator side with established institutions and executive roles to going into consultancy side or starting up your own firm. So how did it feel at the time in shifting from that large organization, the salary, towards to the creating a company and consultancy?
Yeah, sure. That was very hard. And in the early days, it was quite tough and had some very lean months because you are dependent on retainer type projects or one-off consultancy fees. And we did actually start the business on the advice of some of my backers, specializing in employee engagement, rather weirdly, because we felt there was a gap in the number of financial companies. They weren't doing enough to engage with their staff to find out what they thought about the levels of satisfaction, for example. So we started doing employee engagement studies, mainly for a lot of financial institutions, including banks, but it then became very commoditized. And the fees were being driven down. And I had a very lucky break a couple of years later where I bumped into a journalist from the Financial Times in a coffee shop in the FT. And he'd heard a rumor that a very big institutional investor in Saudi had liquidated assets with many overseas investment management companies, and it gave me a piece of paper and pen and said, have you heard how much they've liquidated? I had a rough idea. I wrote down 54 billion. He wrote down his figure, which was 50 billion, and we compared the numbers, and he said, I think we've got a story here. So he wrote an article which was then the lead piece in the Financial Times about 2 weeks later about Sama in Saudi liquidating $52 billion, and I was quoted because we agreed on a quote over that coffee. This story then went viral, was picked up by every business title around the world, whether it be Wall Street Journal, including my quotes, and obviously sourcing it to the Financial Times. And a very large French asset management company asked me into a meeting, and they said, how did you get quoted on the front page of the Financial Times? We have a PR agency that's never got us into the Financial Times. So I explained how it happened. There was a bit of luck, and they hired me. I'm still working with this organization many years on. And so this journalist from the Financial Times, who's now actually the FT correspondent in Scotland, gave me my first lucky break. But I was doing comms for Newton and Bank of New York Mellon prior to that, but it wasn't my full-time role. Okay. But I was lucky enough to be given quite a free remit to do sales, marketing, and comms. Okay. And after this story in the FT, I then started to attract more and more investment management companies to handle their comms and PR in this part of the world.
So tell me exactly more about that in terms of your business and who your clients are.
Yeah, sure. I won't necessarily mention who they all are, but we work on a retainer basis, and they include some very well-known global investment management companies. They have offices here. They have spokespeople coming over all the time from New York or London or Singapore, and they want to appear on Bloomberg or CNBC or some of the Arabic shows like Ashak, which is a JV with Bloomberg. So a lot of the work is to do with broadcast, TV and radio, preparing our guests for a live interview, agreeing with the guest producer, because the guest producer decides on who's being interviewed, what the topics are going to be. So there's a lot of stuff that actually goes on prior to an interview. And then we normally take the guest to the studio and bring out the red carpet. So, yeah, it's a pretty hands-on job looking after these quite pampered CEOs and CIOs who are in town for, let's say, a day or two and want to ensure that everything goes smoothly.
Okay. So what advice would you give somebody or a company who wishes to raise their profile in the media?
It depends on what sort of company they are, because the media here is quite complex. You've got broadcasters, TV, radio shows. You've got loads of newspapers in English and Arabic. You've got business magazines, lifestyle magazines. So with any new client, we always try to have a brainstorming session to determine which broadcasters or titles are most relevant to their audience. So we will have our ideas. They're going to have their own ideas because they might think, okay, our clients are institutional investors. These are the TV shows they love watching. You know, when we go to their office, we can see Bloomberg's on in the background, or it could be CNBC. So you need to have a debate as to which media is most relevant to each client, and it varies. And then we normally categorize the media between tier 1, which is what we're focused on, tier 2, which we'll spend only a little bit of time on, and tier 3, which in our opinion is complete waste of time. And there are many here that have lovely websites but don't actually have much of an audience. So you've got to be very careful about which media to focus on, and also give thought to how to pitch your client to them.
Yeah, it must be so challenging because in a predominantly where business is done mostly in English, a lot of the media that, for example, I am hooked to are global media.
Yeah.
Right? So it's hard for a media industry to be born out of here to compete with the global for engagement. So how do you manage that aspect where there's a firm here, they want attention within the region, but a lot of the media that the end users actually listen to are usually global platforms?
Sure, that's certainly true for financial services. But if we had, let's say, the Capital Club is a good example. I'm a member of the Capital Club. I handle their PR. I'm sure they won't mind me mentioning that. So we're not going to pitch them into Bloomberg or CNBC. They're more interested in the local media, and particularly lifestyle magazines, because they want to attract wealthy individuals who might want to be part of a business club in the DIFC. So the strategy we use for the Capital Club is very different to, let's say, an investment management company. But having said that, there are journalists at Bloomberg who focus on the luxury sector. So that lady is actually relevant to the Capital Club because she's based here, and she wants to interview five-star hotels, amazing restaurants, and clubs like the Capital Club.
Very interesting. And for financial services where trust is so important, brand is so important. So in your experience, what is more important? Is it the brand, or is it the actual performance or experience that they're delivering to their client base? And how much energy should be focused on brand versus the other?
Sure. If you're a guest producer, let's say Bloomberg, it's often easier to have guests on from big brands. And also the anchors doing the interview will derive comfort from the fact that it's a BlackRock or a Schroders or a Fidelity or a Mundi, whoever it might be, because these are recognized big institutions managing, hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars. Our challenge sometimes is when we have a new client that isn't managing much. It could be $5 to $10 billion. But they have a really
not much.
It's not much in the scheme of things.
I know, of course.
It sounds
on a relative
basis,
of course.
But the founder may have worked for one of these big institutions in the past, and our the reason we get paid is, I think, because we're very good at securing interviews, even with some small institutions. But it does help if the founder has worked for a big company in the past, because that ticks a box, and also they've had lots of experience in doing live TV interviews, and that ticks another box. And if they happen to be a female executive, that definitely ticks a box, because a lot of these broadcasters want to have more females on their shows, because obviously there are so many men dressed like me, white shirt, boring blue jacket, so they want to increase their quota, understandably, of female spokespeople, but it does help if the person's had experience of live TV or live radio, and if they haven't, we'll do the media training for them and prepare briefing notes beforehand, and then put their mind at rest before going on as to this is what you should or shouldn't do. there's a lot of coaching that is required.
Yeah, makes sense. It's just in an industry which has a lot of financial services institutions, it's important to stand out amongst the rest. I've met you because you were doing a lot of awareness about scams, in particular financial scams in the region. So can you tell me more about how prevalent scams are in the financial industry in this region or in this country versus others?
Sure. I think it's actually probably worse now than it ever has been, in spite of there being so many regulators. I think when I first moved here some 20 years back, there weren't really scammers. There were some really awful financial advisors who weren't qualified or regulated. And that was definitely the Wild West. That has improved, and now there are some decent wealth managers, firms like yourselves that offer various different solutions on other platforms. So I think the financial advice wealth management sector's improved because of regulation, and a lot of consumers now a bit more aware of the questions you should ask. But what I found in the last 2 years or so, I've been approached by many companies offering ridiculous guaranteed monthly amounts, like 3% a month.
Yeah, that's 3% a year.
A month.
They're not compounding.
It's crazy. And they're not regulated. They're often working from an operation in Deir or Karama, or actually, I did go and meet one in Emaar Square recently.
You go and meet them?
Yeah. I've met some of these, and I've done some mystery shopping. And there's only so much I can say though about these firms because defamation laws here. And there's one company that...
Can you tell us more about what is defamation law here, and what are the limits of what can be said and what can't be said in general in the media?
You can't be seen to criticize a company, whether it be on social media or in print, because you could end up with a defamation lawsuit. So you have to be very careful. You have to kind of allude as to what the company might be
without name calling.
Without naming.
So it's not name. It's I've seen this kind of thing happen. Yeah. So and when you mystery shop, you're finding out more about this. You're going undercover.
Yeah. I then report them to a regulator, and some of these regulators have taken action. But one of my close friends is an investigative journalist at the Khalij Times, Mazhar Faruqi. And he's investigated many scammers. He's actually just produced a book called The Maz Files, which I keep promising him I'm going to buy. And he has unearthed many, many scammers, reported them to the police. And as a result of his good work, many are now languishing in prisons. One individual who was from Goa in India ran a company that had 7,000 investors. Many worked for airlines in the UAE, and they were all scammed out a lot of money. He's now got a prison sentence, I think, of 545 years.
Yeah, that's 7,000 households. That's 7,000 people that saved money, that had objectives.
Yeah, many pilots. I think Mazhar was partly responsible for bringing down that organization. And they always have fancy names like Blue Chip. And often they draw people in because they have fancy literature, lovely websites. They might have a big launch, and they will have some ambassadors there who could be ex-football celebrities. And if you see a company that is spending too much at launch, then I'd always be a bit wary. But the key thing is they need to be regulated. So if they're doing business in the UAE, they must be regulated, whether it be by ESCA, DFSA, or ADGM, or UAE Central Bank. There are many different regulators. They have to be regulated. Doesn't matter whether they're regulated overseas, like in the UK, US, or somewhere more fringe, like Seychelles, for example.
Yeah, they've got
to be regulated here. And there are lots of red flags to look out for. I think the first one would be who they're regulated by. And even if they say they're regulated on their website, double check with the regulator's website, because they might be lying.
There's a public register.
There's a public
Every
register.
regulator has a public register, so you can just search the company's name and find out.
Yeah. And it really winds me up when I look at some of these websites, and they don't even have the management team there, that's always a red flag. I mean, why wouldn't you list your executive management team? So if they don't, then I'm very, very suspicious.
Interesting.
If they post on LinkedIn a lot, but they don't allow comments, that's another red flag, because there's one company in particular, I think you can probably guess who I'm talking about. They advertise quite a lot in magazines, on airlines, and they might have some regulation here. However, when they post something about a bond that might be offering a yield of 15, 18% a year, they don't allow comments. And the reason is because if they allowed comments, people like you and I, who work in the sector, would actually be asking them some very difficult questions.
Of course.
Yeah.
You see all the time. I see it every few weeks where I get a question from someone who's asking about, and sometimes it's not even 18, it's 12% guaranteed returns. And you see it very often, and then it's an education and awareness sessions. And you could do that awareness session on comments. So the fact that they're disallowing comments must say something. I like that tip.
Yeah. And I sometimes host events at the Capital Club. One was recently with this guy, Mazar, and we had a lady on stage who'd actually been scammed out of something like 50 million dirhams.
15 million
dirhams, and it included money from her parents.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And Mazar was helping her with a civil case against the scammers, and hopefully she might get some of this money back. But we don't have the time necessarily to discuss her particular case, but it was a packed audience, all listening to this poor Indian woman about how she first got involved with these scammers who were promising the earth in terms of high returns. Why don't you come work from our office from time to time? They were also going to launch a big event at the O2 in London, and they were going to have speakers like Bill Gates. And of course, it was all a scam. But she put $120,000 into the launch of this event with many other investors, because they had this lovely literature about all the VIPs that they were going to have as speakers. Yeah, people don't do enough due diligence at the end of the day. Yeah.
Wow. So you said there's two ways so far. You've said to detect is look at whether they're regulated, see if they allow some feedback on their content.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that one can do to see or identify a scam versus something that's legitimate?
Lots of big institutions have fallen for scammers. If you remember Bernie Madoff, for example, he
huge one.
Yeah, he scammed I think $65 billion, and there was some well-known Swiss private banks that set up feeder funds to go into his master fund, and that was with them even visiting the office and kicking the tires to make sure everything was correct. So lots of people fall for scams, but I think you need to ask around and do Google searches. I often look at reputations of companies. There are various websites like Trustpilot, for example. It's not perfect, but it gives a rating system 0 to 5, and I find their reviews to be pretty accurate.
Very nice.
So yeah, whether it be for a financial company or let's say I'm looking to buy as I've done recently from an advert on Instagram, a new Zoom background that I wanted for my business, I thought I'd better check out the reputation of the company that I saw advertised on Instagram, because Instagram does attract a lot of scam products, but their reputation was good. It had a score of 4.5 out of 5 on Trustpilot. So I then went online and used my credit card to, end up with some really good 3D images for a Zoom background. So I think you just need to do a lot of due diligence. Check with the regulator, and if you meet a wealth manager, for example, ask what his or her qualifications might be. I know you're highly qualified, but there will be some financial advisors who maybe 6 months back were selling real estate and now are a financial advisor. It's important to ask what their experience has been, who they are qualified with. Is it the CISI or CFA or CII? There are all these different trade bodies. that wealth managers or financial advisors have to be qualified with. And even if they say on their business card they have X, Y, and Z, you can go to the portals of these companies like CISI to just double check.
Indeed. Yeah, I think to add on to that as well, it's sometimes it's also going to more than one institution and taking multiple different feedbacks in terms of what one is saying in terms of product and another. And usually it's similar to, and I say it's when you go to a doctor, if you go to 3 different doctors, you usually have a stronger sense of who's being honest and who's not being honest as well. So yeah, credentials matter, philosophy matters, getting different opinions matters as well. And I agree, I think it's really about who you're dealing with as well, because sometimes it could be one institution, but different people within it. You want to make sure that you trust the individual, you trust the organization, and you trust the regulatory body that's overseeing it.
Yeah.
I think towards the regulator, how important is the regulator's role in trusting a financial institution?
Well, they're a lot tougher now, particularly the DFSA. They have fined many companies, and it takes a lot longer now to become a regulated entity here in the UAE. The process used to be quite quick, but now some companies have been waiting 6 to 9 months. There's such a backlog of applications as well. So they're very thorough about who the directors and executives are, and also the CEO or SEO, as it's called, will be thoroughly investigated and have background checks to make sure that person is qualified.
Yeah, I agree. So I like asking this question to everyone, and it's why do we save, and what's the purpose of wealth, in your view?
Yeah, no, it's to obviously ensure that you can leave something for your family. I've got 2 young kids. One's 21 at Manchester Met University. The other's just landed her first job in London.
Congrats.
And I would love to help them secure a deposit on their first house. So I think it's very important to save money, but not necessarily put all your eggs in one basket. I've had a savings plan running for both my children for many years, and maybe it should be cash soon, so that will help with the deposit on their first property. And having, again, hosted quite a few events in, let's say, the Capital Club on different asset classes, I certainly have realized that having listened to experts who talk about gold or asset allocation or crypto, that you need to be very diversified. Because when I had a crypto expert on stage a while back, he was trying to convince the audience that just buy Bitcoin, forget real estate, forget gold.
Put everything.
Put everything.
Don't diversify. All your eggs in one basket.
All your eggs in one basket. And yet the guy from the World Gold Council, someone I respect, he was maybe suggesting an allocation, and it's now treated as a proper asset gold that was announced recently within portfolios. Maybe 3 to 5%, which seems pretty sensible to me. But you've got to go to a wealth manager or a private banker if you've got, let's say, more than $5 million to get some sound advice. And that's why it may be worth explaining that there are different approaches you can use, either the DIY approach. There are platforms like yourselves and others where it's, I guess, a mix of either DIY or
digital and human advice.
Digital and human.
Yep.
Or you go to financial advisor, but a financial advisor often is a generalist. They're marketing insurance products, general insurance and savings plans. The next level up might be a wealth manager who typically will look after someone with assets of between, let's say, $100,000 to $1 million. Then you have these external asset managers, which has grown enormously, particularly in this part of the world. They're normally ex-private bankers, set up their own independent operation, and they might take on clients with between 1 to 5 million. And then you have private banks with, let's say, plus 5 million. And then you have private banks that deal with ultra high net worth individuals, where you might need more than 25 to $50 million of assets to even be considered as a client. So you have all these different types of advisors, or the DIY approach.
Yeah, I think regardless of where you go, the most important thing is, do I trust what I'm being told?
Yeah.
Can I fact check what I'm being told?
Yeah.
Is it in my best interest, or is it in the best interest of the person sitting opposite of me? And then, again, taking different opinions and validating that.
And asking how much they're being paid or how they're being paid.
I agree.
Is it fee-based?
I agree.
Or is it commission-based, or is it a mixture of the two? But there should be full transparency on the way they're being paid.
Yeah, usually that kind of stuff is in the terms, but no one reads the fine print. So sometimes asking that explicitly, getting it in an email makes sense. It's like, in an email, I'd just like to know, how does your institution get paid, or how do you get paid? And from there, you can figure out the incentive model in general.
Yeah. And if they drive up to your house in a Bugatti, I'd be a bit worried.
That makes sense. So I was surprised to know that you're 63 years old, and you've been working for a long time, and you've been working with a lot of purpose. So when do you see yourself starting to take it a bit easier?
Probably not for a while. As long as my health remains intact. I love my job. I have some great clients, and I could see myself doing this for maybe another 5 to 7 years. I would love to definitely sell part of my business. I'm in talks with one company already, so I'd love to be part of a bigger organization that will help with further growth and infrastructure support, particularly when it comes to accounts, etc., and HR. But as long as I'm enjoying what I do, have great clients, why would I want to start working? And many of my friends who have retired or taken early retirement are strangely back at work without any exception.
Yeah, I've seen that quite often. I've worked with a lot of people who have retired, and one of the common themes that you see is after someone retires, they quickly go back to work, whether that be in a full-time capacity or in a consulting capacity or in a part-time capacity. The people that I have seen that have succeeded in retirement usually have plans for it. And I don't mean plan for it as in at this age. It's how am I filling up my time? What is my purpose? A common theme I've seen amongst people who are able to retire, which was shocking to me, and it's still shocking to me, is golf. For some reason, a common theme of people retire is like, I've been spending my time golfing. But I don't think it's golf. It's just I have something that I'm spending my time doing that's giving me purpose.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most common theme.
Yeah, I'd like to take on some, and this is a plug, NED roles. So I'm up for one new NED role, non-exec role. And I'd love to later on in life have some additional NED roles. So I can still consult and give advice to a company, whether it be about sales, marketing or PR or whatever. That would get me out of bed. And I still love traveling. I was in India last week for a couple of days. I've got 2 clients in India now, so I'm trying to diversify also out of just the Middle East. I want to have clients in Asia and India, and I get a great buzz out of flying and traveling and meeting new people.
Plugs are fine, but now there's going to be a balance of accounts. So looking... actually, before I ask that question, are you extending your golden visa then by the end of it, you think?
I've got another 7 or 8 years.
Another 7 or 8 years. Okay, so you have some time to think about that.
I've some time.
Okay.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because my most successful LinkedIn post has been with my golden visa. I didn't think it would attract much interest, but I remember hiring a professional photographer. I was standing outside the Museum of the Future, just been completed, and I held my golden visa in my hand like that. The focus was not so much on me or my card, it was more the iconic building behind me. And I posted it on LinkedIn. It's probably had, 60,000, 70,000 views already. And of the people who saw it, quite a few then came to me saying, how did you get it? But quite a few journalists approached me saying, again, what's the process? So I got quite a lot of media coverage out of that one social media post. So I only mention this because it's a good example of how, if you want to raise your profile, yes, you can do it through the media, if it's very targeted and there's a strategy behind it. But also when it comes to LinkedIn, I think it's a great way of raising your own profile or of your business if it's done professionally.
Yeah, but I think there's also authenticity, which I think that brought a bit of, right? So sometimes when something authentic and it's something personal, it adds value, right? Like you describe the backdrop and the golden visa. It's authentic.
Yeah, and also I wasn't bragging about, oh my God, look how amazing and lucky I am. It was more about, yes, I've got this golden visa, but these are the benefits for me of having one.
Yeah, fair.
So it wasn't a braggy type post. I mean, I think that helped to generate quite a lot of attention. But the most interesting thing is I got PR out of it myself by journalists approaching me.
Yeah, I think speaking about sometimes the difficulty in identifying the trust or the value of the institution you're dealing with, it's driven a lot of people to use real estate as their primary form of wealth management. So you've lived in the region for long. Has that changed at all? Or what's your view of how the region has used real estate as a primary form of preserving wealth and generating an income?
Now, I've had personal experience of investing in real estate here. I think it was in 2007 I bought in Old Town, and let's say I paid 2.9 million dirhams for a 2-bedroom flat. Very nice. It went up to about 4.5 million. I tried to sell it. There weren't any buyers. It then crashed, and I think the value at one point was about 1.8 million, so I was quite a bit underwater. And I was worried that my bank was going to ask for, a cash injection, but luckily that never happened. I then sold it for the price that I bought it at, but my issue was the service fees with email were very high, something like 35,000 dirhams for the shared swimming pool, etc. So I think real estate's obviously booming, and because of my age, I'd rather rent, to be honest. I'm 63, so why would I want, another mortgage or put down a large amount of cash into something that could be quite volatile? If you're young and you're moving to Dubai and you're going to live here a long time, then it makes perfect sense, I think, to buy a property. Obviously, flats are a lot less expensive and also far less to run, particularly with DWAR being so expensive. So I'm going to be renting for a while. But depending on your situation, real estate can be a great investment in this part of the world, but it is quite volatile, particularly with the amount of supply. And I think, like earlier, we were talking about who you can trust when it comes to wealth management. It's exactly the same in real estate. We do an annual survey about who's got the best and worst reputations, profession-wise, in the UAE. We've done it every year for the last 5 years. And the worst reputations are always recruiters, real estate agents, credit card issuers. Financial advisors normally come out about 6th or 7th, but it's always estate agents and recruiters that get bashed. So again, if you're going to buy a property here, I think you need to do lots of due diligence on either the developer or the estate agent that is making all these promises.
Yeah, that's great advice. And you see another theme in the UAE of holding a lot of cash. And when we look at the numbers, you see that very prominent, other than real estate, is a large amount of cash. What are your thoughts there?
Money I have is actually overseas, so I don't really have cash in this country. But I think the banks do offer reasonable deposit rates, and it's secure. And there are lots of digital banks being set up. But again, you need to go online and find out which bank offers the best rates for your money. And again, people don't often do that.
Yeah,
they just keep the money with the bank that they've been using for the last 10 years or so and not shop around.
Convenience, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of the times. We spend much more time on our work life. And then when it comes to our personal life, it's health, wellness, leisure, but then a lot of times we don't want to run another errand of opening another bank account.
There's hassle,
something
isn't
like that. Yeah, there's hassle, right?
Yeah, I've had the same bank account in the UK for 40 odd years.
There
I
you go.
should switch,
There you go.
but it's a hassle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
I
last
should
thing you
be
want to do
with-
is when you go to the UK to go to the bank.
Yeah, and
and-
all the direct debits I have. I know it's a lot easier now, but maybe that's what I'll do when I next go back to the UK.
Yeah. I'll remind you.
Thank you.
So looking back at your journey thus far and the insights you've shared, what would you say is the most important lesson for our listeners?
Having people around you that you can trust. So I have some full-time employees. I've got one in India, for example, that I went and saw in Bangalore just on Monday this week. She's worked with me for some 9 years now. I've got quite a few external contractors as well, and many of them have also worked for me for that same period. So I'm very lucky to have either full-time employees that have been with me for a long time, or external contractors, freelancers, who either get paid on a monthly consultancy rate or for ad hoc work, but I can really trust them to deliver within my timescales.
So trusted relationships that you're working with.
Yeah, but also with the relevant background. They all have experience in financial services.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much.
No,
It
my
was a
pleasure.
pleasure
It's
having
been
you.
really good fun. Yeah. Thank you.